All right, you can start recording. So welcome everyone for tonight's roundtable on chronic illness and its effect on mental health. And tonight we have three speakers. And first I want to thank the three of you to be part of this roundtable. This is very special and very intimate. So I'm very thankful that you can all join and be able to share your story with us. So we have Eric Burns, Steph Pendlebury, and Uwe Lübke, if I can pronounce it properly, and sorry for the mispronunciation. And we can start with maybe do like a little presentation of each of you before we start going directly into the discussion. So who wants to start? Maybe Eric? Or...
Yeah, sure. My name's Eric. I just recently finished a PhD at ETH. So I guess that makes me officially unemployed. But it was definitely a learning experience over my PhD. During the course of my PhD, I certainly had increasing chronic issues, which I guess we'll talk about in a second, chronic illness with my kidney. But other than that, I come from the United States. And I also did my master's in London, and that's actually how I know Steph.
Thank you very much. Steph, do you want to go on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for making me feel so welcome. So yeah, my name's Steph. I grew up in Scotland, and then I moved did my undergrad in Scotland, and I moved to the south of England and did my PhD in a postdoc in London, which is how I know Eric at Imperial. And I still work at Imperial, but I don't do research anymore. I'm on like the management side of things. And I have inflammatory bowel disease, but I guess we'll talk about that in a minute.
Thank you very much. And on you, Uwe?
Hi, I'm Uwe. I'm a PhD student in physics at ETH. Eric invited me here, and I met him at the ARVID board, so the organization that represents the employees and PhDs and postdocs at ETH. And there I was basically working with the peer-to-peer counseling group for some time, that gives advice to people who have some mostly problems with relationships in their work.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
This is really great and very interesting. So now we will go on to your stories. So what will happen is that each of you can discuss your own stories with chronic illness and your mental health. And if you agree, we can ask you questions. So either at the end of your talk or during, like, you can tell us whatever you prefer, and we can all discuss it together. So if this formula is fine for all of you, we can start with any of you. So just do as you feel right now. Eric or Uwe, Steph?
Sure. Again, you want us to introduce a bit about our condition, or sorry, can you?
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess one thing that we're also okay with, just to let Steph and Uwe know, if you be as intimate as you'd like to be, don't share everything you're not comfortable with. In my case, I have a condition called Iga Nephropathy. It's an immune condition, so it's an autoimmune disorder. Essentially what happens is my immune system ends up targeting my kidneys, and then my kidneys slowly fail over time. It's interesting with this disease in that there's oftentimes a very wide range of effects. Some people can have their whole lives without knowing they have the disease, and some people their kidneys progress towards kidney failure, which unfortunately I happen to be in the more severe case, and so it's certainly been a bit of a roller coaster ride over the past 6 years since I was officially diagnosed. You probably had this disease before I was diagnosed, but yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about it here, and yeah, happy to share also my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Do you want to continue directly on you, Eric? Should I start asking you a question, or you would rather have the other introduce themselves with their own illness first?
Oh, I think if it's okay, we can go ahead and do a quick round, and then we can ask questions.
Very good then. So Uwe, can you tell us a bit about it? And as Eric said, of course, I didn't said it again, but you are free to share as much as you want. There is no pressure, nothing forced, and it's really for you to feel comfortable and to feel like we are all supporting you through this. So just do as you feel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for the people that we advised in this counseling group, of course, I can't share their names, but if it's anonymous, I can tell what they what kind of problems they usually have. And I don't know if most of you are in science, then I guess maybe it applies as well. Yeah, so most people, they run into some, I don't know, communication problem with the supervisor or a colleague, and then it escalates, and there is a probably external pressure as well. And yeah, then especially for international students, they're often really afraid that they get fired, because then they have problems with the visa and so on, so on, so on, so on. And then the balance, the weird balance of power between professors and students really makes it difficult also to solve these problems, because all the cards are held in a sense by the professor, and students have normally very little recourse, and it's quite hard to switch groups to the end of your PhD as well. So then you just have to take it, and I guess find other ways to keep up your mental health.
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of us here can relate to that, to those issues. So on to you, Steph.
Yeah, so as far as I was aware, I was a really fit and healthy individual until the age of 18. And then over the summer between finishing what you would call high school and starting university, starting my undergrad, I just got more and more and more ill. But basically, I was just really constipated to start with. And, you know, the GPs were just like, yeah, some women just get constipated, but it wasn't like a day here and there. It was continuous, worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Which is kind of embarrassing, particularly when you're basically a teenager. Yeah, I was, and because I wasn't working over the summer, so I wasn't like trying to lead a normal life, really. I was just lazing about before starting uni, to be brutally honest. I kind of didn't realize how bad I actually was, which sounds a bit daft, but so I probably shouldn't have gone to uni at all. Luckily, I wasn't too far away. So I grew up on the edge of Glasgow, which is a largest city, about 1 million people, on the kind of southwest of Scotland. And then I was going to university at Edinburgh University, which is only kind of 40, 50 miles away on the other side of Scotland, also in the south. And there's regular trains and buses in between. And actually, as it happens, my dad worked at the university as well, though in a different department. Yeah, so I managed Freshers Week in week 1 of the first term, and then I had an emergency admission to hospital. And I weighed, I mean, I'm really small, I'm very slim, and I'm really short. I'm like less than 1.50 m. But I weighed, oh gosh, I don't know what this is in kilos, but I weighed, Eric can translate for me quickly, but I think I weighed less than 6 stone when I was in uni, because I'd gone from being constipated to having really bad diarrhea, just awful. I couldn't keep anything in either end really by the end. Yeah, and you're bleeding inside with inflammatory bowel disease. You have like ulcers. It can be anywhere from your mouth to the other end, not necessarily all the way through, but they bleed. So you're basically bleeding internally, and just blood is just coming out. And so I had a blood count of about half what it should be. So if you suddenly lost half your blood because, I don't know, you had an accident or something, you would basically go into shock and you might well die. But if it happens over a period of weeks, your body adapts. So my body had adapted, and I just didn't quite realize how bad everything was. anyway, I had this emergency admission to hospital. They finally worked out what was going on. I had inflammatory bowel disease, no history of it in my family, but of course it's your bowels, right? Nobody talks about it, especially in the UK. I don't know what it's like in Switzerland, maybe it's similar. Yeah, so I sort of had one emergency admission. I remember sitting in hospital and saying to the doctors, but when can I go back to university? And I just remember them looking really shocked, and I didn't understand how ill I was, and I don't think they understood that I didn't understand how ill I was. Anyway, I had another admission to hospital a few weeks later, and by the time I was kind of at the stage where I was just about fit enough I could possibly have gone back, it was like February, half the year's gone. So I ended up having an unintentional gap year to recover, and then starting again the following year. And I think mental health wise, I think it's really tough, and I think maybe people aren't very sympathetic or don't. I mean, maybe things are better now. This was literally half my lifetime ago, so things might have improved. I think generally mental health is more at the forefront of people's minds now, but I think people are sort of well equipped to deal with the physical aspects of a disease, even a chronic disease. So it's an autoimmune disease, like Eric described. Your immune system attacks your own body for often unknown reasons. And I felt betrayed by my body. I felt like I'd been really fit and healthy. I did long distance hikes carrying a tent. I was very athletic. I ran a lot. I climbed mountains. Okay, not big mountains like the Alps, Scottish mountains, somewhat smaller, but still. And and then suddenly I'd gone from being this like fit and healthy person that I knew I could just rely on my body to for days at a time, to suddenly, like, when I came out of hospital, I remember climbing the steps to my parents' house. I think there were maybe 7 steps. And like halfway up the steps, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I'm going to manage to get to the top, And it's physically that's tough, but mentally you have to accept that suddenly you can't do things you used to be able to do. And it's not just like breaking an arm or a leg or something where chances are in a year's time, there's basically, there's no change to your life. You're back to normal. That's it. You're recovered. With something chronic like this, that's your entire life ahead of you is going to be dealing with this illness. And I'm very lucky that now, and for the past few years, I'm on a drug regime where it's very well controlled. Probably helps that I'm not an undergraduate anymore and things aren't quite so stressful. And so I'm basically in remission. So it's like normal, relatively normal. But I take immunosuppressants, so that made me clinically extremely vulnerable as far as COVID was concerned. The letters from the UK government were like, you must lock yourself in your house. You're allowed to open a window, but you're not allowed to go outside. You should not sleep in the same bedroom as someone else. You should not share the same bathroom as someone else. You should avoid being in the kitchen at the same time as someone else. I was like, stuff that. My mental health is more important.
We didn't get any of this in Switzerland, is it?
Yeah, but the first lockdown, that was what they were saying people who should shield should do. So all that also I didn't do all that.
But by the way, just to translate, so you said you're 6 tone. That's 38 kilograms.
I think I was less than that.
Yeah, so less than 38 kilograms, or to the Americans, if there are, that's less than 83 pounds.
Thank you, Eric. I probably should have thought about that before.
Insane.
It was only as the words were starting to come out of my mouth, I thought, oh no, I
quick
don't know what this is in metric.
I mean, you are, if I can say, you are smaller, but still nothing. 83 pounds is
so that's how how frail. And my mother said when I went home, she said I looked like a puff of wind would blow me away. And I think that's tough on your family as well, in the mental health aspects as well. I think you feel, particularly your parents probably feel completely helpless, because there is and particularly by the time you're an adult, the doctors won't even talk to them anymore. By the time you're 18, that's it. They're like, no, I can't discuss this with you. And they just feel totally helpless. They don't know what they can do, and to be honest, there might not be very much they can do. And that probably applies to close friends as well. And the other thing is that I felt like a fraud. I felt like people would look at me and be like, "There's nothing wrong with you. Why are you making such a fuss?" And my mum said that I looked awful, you know. but it's not like you're in a wheelchair.
That's
it's not like, you know, you were attached to a drip anymore at home or something, or you're I don't know, you've gone yellow, you're jaundiced or something like that. There's, you know, physically from the outside you look okay, and you feel that you have to justify yourself. You know, that there is actually something.
Well, I guess
you know,
it's interesting that you brought that up, because I guess I never would have thought that I feel like a fraud, but then I realized that when I think about my actions over the years, like I'll go to a party with friends before Corona, and I probably I don't want to think that I shouldn't be. I don't want to think that I need to have more restrictions on things for someone with my health. And so I kind of let myself probably behave more risky than I should, just to create the image to myself and maybe also to the other people that I'm okay. And also there are times that, like for instance, I shouldn't, with my kidney problem, I shouldn't eat so much meat. I shouldn't eat so much milk products and whatnot. And but yeah, but I don't feel like I should bring this up when I'm around other people, because I don't know, I feel a bit self-conscious about this. It's hard to admit, but yeah, I never would have really thought about that if you didn't bring it up.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I think friends are often very more supportive than you expect them to be, and I think it's a good thing that nowadays people are more open to discussing kind of bodily functions, let's say. And I feel quite lucky that, you know, I can just come on a Zoom call with a load of strangers and talk about my bowels, you know. Like 20 years ago that might not have been the case. And so I think we should be prepared to talk about things, and actually talking really helps. Especially if you can find someone who has some inkling of what you're going through. So like talking to Eric, and I felt really bad because I hadn't realized he was ill, like when I knew him in London. You know, and I felt like I should have been more supportive because I had no idea. And actually I can be reasonably sympathetic because I don't know anything about livers really, but I have some idea of what it is to be told you have an autoimmune disease, your body is attacking itself. Oh, great, thanks very much. You know, so I think actually talking to people, you never know, it might be that there's someone that you think you know quite well, but actually they're going through stuff that you might be able to help with, or they might be able to help you. So I do think it's important to talk to people.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think especially when it comes to chronic illness, there's sometimes end up being a lot of similarities with mental illness. I mean, first of all, when you have a chronic illness, I think it's easier to have mental illness to go along with it. But when you have chronic illness, it isn't always something that people can see, as you said. So it ends up being kind of very, you suffer, if you do suffer, you suffer alone. Sorry, is my internet back? Okay.
Yeah, you just broke up slightly there, Eric. It ends up being ...
Sorry, but yeah, so if yeah, well, welcome to coronavirus times. But yeah, if you're suffering, then you end up kind of suffering alone with chronic illness, and this is a bit isolating, just as it would be with mental illness.
I was going to say something else, and I can't remember what it was now. To do with mental health. Will come back to me, I'm sure.
Yep. So
talking is important. I remember saying that. I'm trying to remember. There was something else that occurred to me while Eric was talking, and now I've forgotten what it is. So maybe if Eric keeps talking, I'll remember.
Okay, no problem. Also, I switched Wi-Fi. I'm sorry about that break. Yeah, but it's also really interesting hearing about your story, because I guess everyone's chronic illness is also very, very different, and mine was kind of, and it's also a story again that, like, not many people outside of yourself really knows or experiences. And for me was, I guess, I wasn't really formally diagnosed until 6 years ago. But before that, when I was at the end of my high school, I had a couple of times where I guess I urinated some blood, right? And so my doctors were like, okay, it's not not normal. And they were suspecting that it probably had something. But to myself, I kind of told myself, oh, sometimes people have asthma when they're young and they get over it. So kind of with the arrogance associated with being young, I ignored it for a few years. In my undergraduate, I didn't do so much about it. And in contrast, kind of to your story, where I guess you at the beginning, during your undergraduate, you were really, really, you had a lot of physical effects from your autoimmune disorder. For me, I was really taking it very, very easy, and I was working out, and I was actually at the biggest I ever was, and I was probably almost twice as heavy as I was now. Working out and going to the gym, and within a very short amount of time, because of my kidney illness, getting diagnosed with it. Also, it's not healthy for your kidney when you're eating a lot of protein, which again, I was being ignorant and kind of trying to ignore it and live like all of my friends were. I was like thinking, why can't I just be the same as everyone else? If I don't think about it, maybe I can just be normal. Maybe I am normal and doctors just don't know. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And so for me, it was really it took kind of a mental toll from being someone that, I thought myself attractive. I was big. I was like, yes, I'm muscular for the first time. I've always been skinny. And then within that really short amount of time, getting diagnosed, shrinking really heavily, taking medicine every single day, and realizing that, I have a disease that I really need to be concerned about.
I've just remembered the other thing I was going to say, Eric, and maybe you felt like this as well, is that it's kind of like you've lost control.
Yeah.
And your health and your well-being is suddenly in the hands of other people. And sadly, other people are medical doctors who, I hope I'm not about to offend anyone here, quite often like some of the more arrogant people that you're going to come across, who tend to assume that they're the smartest person in the room, which is a bit irritating when you're probably also the kind of person, PhD at a prestigious academic institution, you tend to also assume you're one of the smartest people in the room. But suddenly your well-being is in their hands. And they're not always terribly good. Depends on the doctor. Probably depends how old they are as well. They're not always terribly good about actually discussing with you or taking on board your concerns or your suggestions, or this is how I feel. I mean, even so, I am asthmatic as well. I mean, Eric mentioned asthma. It's not terribly bad. I suspect my brother's very badly asthmatic, and I suspect I have been asthmatic since at least being a teenager. But because it was so mild, it wasn't. It took me probably about 5 years it was probably from when I was doing my undergrad, actually. I used to go to the doctor, go to the GP about once a year and say, I've been really, but of course it takes 3 weeks to get an appointment. So by the time you see them, you're okay. And just say, look, I really think there's a problem here. I really think there's a problem here. And that's another thing about chronic illnesses, is it isn't continuously bad. Quite often it fluctuates up and down, at least until it gets to a certain tipping point, and then you probably do go over and you are really bad, by which point it's a bit late.
And also the difference between each day can also, so it fluctuates, but the difference between each day can also be very, very small. So by the time, like you mentioned your blood earlier, how you lost half of your blood, but your body kind of course, you probably realize something is wrong after a while, but during that process, when you're getting more and more unhealthy, losing more and more energy, each day just feels normal. You just get used to that.
You just adapt. The adaptability of the human body is really quite amazing, but it's not always a good thing. Anyway, what I was kind of getting at in a very long and circuitous way was that the doctors need to listen properly to what you're telling them. And it took me years and several different GPs before one of them actually listened to me and said, oh yes, what you're describing, we call that irritable airways. It's a type of asthma where da, 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 da. And suddenly someone had listened to me. And actually, I guess it comes back to communication again. You really need to listen to people and take on board what they're saying. But yeah, you're suddenly very dependent on someone else, possibly a complete stranger you've never met before, to A, listen to you and what you're saying properly, and B, then actually, treat you accordingly. And it's, I just found that I was getting so angry with my hospital and my GP practice, because they were just so useless in so many different ways that it's really quite imaginative how many different ways they managed to be useless. But yeah, and you can end up getting so angry and just being in this permanent state on top of everything else, this permanent state of anger. Because you're depending on other people who are just not very good at their job.
I have to admit also, I kind of have this, it's not in all fields, but unfortunately it is a bit with my medical treatment, is that I kind of feel almost, I have a kind of a toxic situation where I don't want, I feel insecure about them believing me. And so I rather than let myself, make sure that they listen to me, I kind of want them to accept, I kind of want to accept what they say and just go along with it sometimes, which unfortunately lets me have, say, sometimes less than adequate treatment sometimes, just because I'm self-conscious that someone is telling me what things are and how things should be. So I want them to believe that I don't know. It's weird. I feel a bit strange admitting this, but I want them to believe that I trust them, or that I want them for them to believe that I think that they know what they're doing, which is also weird. But I really like the concept that you brought up, which is the difficulty in losing control. And this is something that, again, early in undergrad, for me, I felt, I had control over my life for the first time. I left the house. I can get big. I can build my muscles. I can design my future. I have toxic masculinity. I'm American. I can build myself up the way that I want to, because I have confidence, and I can pull myself up by my own boots. But unfortunately, life isn't always like this. And I think also it's a bit toxic to feel like this, because all of our lives aren't just like this. There's a lot of luck, and there's things in your life change. So not everything you can control to begin with. But I think really seeing so clearly, chronic illness forces you so clearly to show that there are really things in life that you cannot really control. And while, of course, as you said, it's still important to make sure that you get good treatment and at least control some of the things that you can do. It's also important. I think for me, I kind of ended up growing a little bit and realizing that it's okay. And I've come to accept that there are some things it might as well, I can control what I can, but I don't also need to control everything.
I think that's a good point, actually. I think I'm not permanently angry with the GP anymore, because I'm just like, you know what, they're rubbish. They're not rubbish, but they're just really not very good.
I have the fair share of comments as well, so I'm not.
Yeah, and it's just a case of, well, okay, what do I need to do to make the best of the situation? And let's just not get angry about this anymore, because having such high blood pressure because I'm so angry with them all the time can't be good for me either. So, what can I do that just let it wash over me a bit? Just work with their rubbish systems and just make the best you can of it. And I mean, my consultant did once say to me, I think it was after I'd been transferred to his care, probably because I'd been such a pain in the arse, frankly, to the previous clinic I'd been with, because they were so useless. So anyway, and he had this phrase, oh, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. And he was like, no, you should complain. You should raise, when you see an issue that you think needs fixing, you should raise that. I mean, screaming and shouting at people, which is not what I do, I should add. is not a good way of doing that. But you should fill in the patient feedback form, or get in touch with the I can't remember what it's called here, the patient liaison service, or their volunteer service, basically between the patients and the hospital. So if the patients feel that there's something not good, they can report it to this service, and then they try and deal with it in the hospital. And that's, I guess that's true for anything, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter or whatever. If you see something that you don't think is right, then try and do your best to call it out in whatever way you're comfortable with, and try and make it better, rather than just going, oh, I don't like that, I don't like what's happening over there, I'm just going to walk away. And hope that you're making it better for everyone.
To take a step back, well, first of all, I really resonate with the last comment that you make, in that you should speak up and you should try to fix things, otherwise they just continue. For me, I feel I shouldn't complain about something unless I've tried to do something about it. But to take a step back with regards to the comments that I made earlier about why I didn't, why I don't, I guess, get better help sometimes, I think also is a bit similar to also why being in academia is difficult to change things. Is because some parts I feel, as a person, formerly as a PhD student, now just recently unemployed, my financial situation and my visa situation is not so secure. I feel I don't have so much flexibility to shout at the people around me, and then I don't have, because then I don't know what other options I would have otherwise. Same thing again, like in academia, if you have an issue, it's difficult, it feels a bit unsettling to bring it up. I guess health-wise, I feel that if I could really complain to the nephrologist who has my life supposedly in his hands, then he can, excuse the phrase, but he can fuck my world up potentially, and I don't want that to happen. So it's very scary, and unfortunately it feels it's harder to make a difference in these cases when you're in such a precarious situation.
It's interesting parallel, isn't it, actually, between sort of being in the care of a consultant or a certain team of medical team, and being either a PhD student or potentially, a postdoctoral researcher, where your career and your job prospects are dependent on the person who also has the power, but in a different way. They have your funding. It's not like you have, well, unless you have a scholarship, unless you're lucky enough to have a scholarship, and even then you probably don't have that much control.
Probably
they have
administration.
They have your funding, they have your references, they have the contacts. I don't know if anyone saw, I'm not sure exactly when it was released, but there's a film I saw on last Friday called Picture a Scientist, and it's based in the North America, but it's very, very good. I don't know how exactly it was released. I saw it through I think it's called Unbalanced STEM Network, and it was UCL, one of the other London universities, had sent a link to one of the academics at Imperial, who sent the link to his contacts at Imperial. But if you have a chance to see that film, it's called Picture a Scientist, and it's really, really good, and it specifically addresses problems to do with basically women in academia. And like I said, it is a very North American US focused, but a lot, I mean, what they were saying, what we've just been discussing about the person who holds the power over you, that was one of the key themes in that film. And also the mental health aspects that the kind of imposter syndrome, or that you're kind of forced to act or to behave in a certain way because that is the way that has been predefined by all your predecessors going back decades and decades and decades. And let's face it, all your predecessors up until quite recently were white, heterosexual, probably men of, with certain backgrounds. And that everyone else is kind of forcibly molded into that shape without necessarily realizing that that's what's happening, because the whole culture has come, that's where the culture has come from. And I think it does remind me of a film that actually my undergrad was at Edinburgh University, and a lot of the chemistry faculty, you would say, at Edinburgh had come together, I think shortly after I graduated, and made a film called, I think they called it Chemical Imbalance, and it was about kind of gender inequality in STEM subjects. And this was probably 10 years ago, and they said something like, oh, it would take, at the current rate of change, it would take 70 years to have gender, and that's just gender equal, never mind everything else equal, you know, equality in academia, and when you get to like professorial level, I think was the point. And it's like, okay, things might be changing, but you know, we have to push to change them faster. Otherwise that's not my lifetime, you know.
No,
not anymore.
I think it's certainly true that, you know, it complicates. It's important to realize that there's so many different layers, and there's so much intersectionality over identities and other issues. So, you know, chronic illness isn't just about chronic illness. It's your life and the history, and in this case, academia also have so many other complications that add on top of it, that it's and nothing is ever so simple. Sorry, I didn't have really a fancy point to make. I was just commenting.
No, but yeah, I think all these things have knock-on effects.
Yeah.
And I think to be like a fully inclusive kind of environment, supportive environment where we all flourish and we all are able to contribute, you know, to the maximum of our ability, and therefore it's better for everybody, you know, and science will progress, then, you know, I think we have to sort of make more of a conscious effort collectively to address some of these problems. And I think I've become aware, sort of the older I get, I become more and more aware that nobody's life is a bed of roses, right? Everybody has shit, frankly, that they have to deal with. It's just everyone has different shit. And you know, you might see someone and think, oh, what do they have? I've got this awful thing that I'm carrying around, you know, whether it's chronic illness, or, you know, your a close family member is terminally ill, or you know, you're massive debt and no chance to get whatever. But everyone has something, you know, and whether it's physically manifested or not, you know, if it's a hidden thing, I think we all need to be aware that everyone has something. And although I do not condone certain types of academic behavior, I think we can probably all think of examples we've seen of behavior that we really don't like. There are often underlying reasons for it, you know, that someone else has been treated badly in the past, and so they've learned to protect themselves or their group or whatever in a certain way, but sadly that way that they've learned to protect themselves then has knock-on effects on everyone else.
I think Lorraine wanted to ask us a couple of questions. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I keep talking.
No problem. The roundtable is for there. And first I wanted to make a comment. You like perfectly right to say that everyone has his own shit in life, and this is exactly why we do the roundtable, so we can all like relate to issues that others have and listen to it and realize that we all struggle somehow in the same and different ways. So we can have like some chronic illness and then react differently to it, or have different environment, or we can have depression and have a very different experience, but also some common parameters. And I think this is so important to discuss, and I'm very happy to hear how you discuss about it together. And this is very enlightening, I would say, for me at least. So to go back a bit at the beginning of your stories, you discussed about your family and how it could have been difficult for them to feel helpful and to support the right way. Could you both tell me a bit more about the supportive environment that you had or not at the beginning when you got diagnosed and you had to build yourself with the disease, and how your environment reacted to it, like a bit more in detail? Would that be okay to share, like for the mental health burden, how people supported you around?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, or?
I don't mind. Up to you. I'm happy to. Shall I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I was very, very lucky, I suppose, in that I literally just left home So, you know, it wasn't like I'd already moved away and I was miles away and I had no connection. So I basically just moved back in with my parents. But actually, that, thinking about it, I think I've kind of forgotten it now, and talking about it reminds me that was a mental blow in itself. Like, you've just reached 18, you're officially an adult by law, like you've moved home, you've moved out of the parental house, you've flown the nest, and boom, something hits you. And this could happen, you know, years later as well. Something hits you and suddenly you're back living at home with your parents, and like, you know, you're back relying on them to look after you again. But I was very, very lucky in that they were there to look after me. I did have that support, you know, and in some ways it's one of the really good things that came out of it, because there were some good things, it wasn't all bad, is that I basically had like the best part of a year to get really close to my mum. And it wasn't that I wasn't that close to my mum, but we spent a lot of time together. And we were much closer after that. So I was really lucky. And I also think, you know, like, I'd spent literally 2 weeks living in a university flat, and my housemates from that university flat, 2 of whom I'd never met before, you know, before moving in there, had like come and visited me in hospital, like come through from another city and visited me in hospital. And that meant so much to me, even though they were practically strangers. You know, it was really nice of them to do that. So even just like relatively small gestures like that can actually have a big impact. So yeah, in that terms, I mean, my friends, my very close friends from school, some of whom I'm still really close to, you know, years later, they were all at uni, so they were kind of scattered about the country. One of them was still in the Glasgow area. I can't remember actually seeing, but you know, she was an undergraduate as well. She was on a busy course. I don't actually remember seeing that much of her. But yeah, actually, the times that people did come and visit me at home, I really cherished that, and it really, yeah, or in hospital for that matter. It really it really was a really nice thing that you could kind of hold on to and think, oh, that person came to see me, and okay, I didn't really have anything to talk about because I have nothing to talk about because I've been in hospital for a week. You know, it's a bit like us now with COVID. What have you done? That you know, it was just really nice and really valuable, you know, gesture for someone to like physically come and see you or phone you up or write you a letter. Some people wrote me a letter. That was so nice, you know.
I think first of all, Lorraine, thank you for the question, because I think, yeah, I don't think that it's difficult for people to understand, not only in your shoes what your experience is, but also, you know, how the, and I guess it's also different again for how the environment interacts with everyone. With the family, obviously family knows, because or most of the time the family knows about the illness a bit, because they're closer to you, and it's probably harder to hide information from your family. But I guess then your friends and the exterior, just like with chronic illness, is difficult to see if you have an illness or not. Sometimes they may be completely unaware, and it's up to the person with the chronic illness to let people know. But anyway, taking a step back, so yeah, it's a bit interesting. I would say that again, I had indication that I had this disease last year of high school. I was 17, 18, and I guess I didn't want to make a big deal, because one, I again, as I explained, I didn't want it to be a big deal. I also didn't want my parents to think it was a big deal. And outside of a couple of weeks that year where I very clearly had issues, I was completely healthy, because this illness can be just one week you have a problem and then you're fine for the rest of your life. So I was like, okay, that's going to happen to me. So I didn't want them to think about it, and I didn't want to think about it. So frankly, I didn't have much. I tried to have my parents not really know, my family not really think about it too much. I would say now though, so since then, my kidney function has declined quite a bit. Sadly, during my PhD, it's declined to the point now where I will actually need to have a kidney transplant, probably sometime in the relatively near future. I'm very, very lucky in that actually just this past week, my family has been very, very supportive, and have, I'm really, really happy that by themselves, some of them have offered to have a live donation and give me a kidney, should it be a good match, which is also a really awkward thing, because when you need an organ transplant, especially kidney transplant, I don't want to be the person to go out and ask people, hey, can I have your kidney? So I'm very, very, I think, you know, growing up, I guess a lot of us, at least especially with me, wanted to kind of escape the identity that I thought that people had of me when I was a kid, right? So we all leave the house, we try to become something different, and I guess I distanced myself a bit from my family. But you know, after this time, it's really just so incredibly amazing and really heartwarming at how much support they have, and they're always there, and which also makes me really feel, I mean, not only really grateful, but also really, it makes me really realize the gap that I guess people can have if they have issues with their family, and or if they don't have a family. It's yeah, it must be really painful. With regards to friends, I think another thing is I just, until very recently, until my Facebook post, I really don't tell anyone, because I guess outside of taking medicine, sometimes I need to eat medicine every single time I eat food. I need to take some medicine to not raise the concentrations of stuff in the food, in my body, and but I try to hide it. So I just take it quickly. Okay, they're not looking, and or I just don't really tell them what's going on, because I feel it's not necessary for them to do that, and I should be able to do things without people needing to feel sympathetic for me. I don't know if that's toxic masculinity. Maybe it is, but yeah, it's. But I do certainly agree that something which hasn't happened so much, but something that I would really, really love is yeah, people sometimes, if I am sick, which luckily I haven't been in the hospital yet, or really sick, ill at home, but people showing their support, messaging and saying, are they okay, sending a card, coming to visit, stuff like that, that makes a really, really big difference. I guess, I know I've been talking for a very long time. I'll make one quick example. I am really, really grateful one time when right before I was diagnosed, when I had really high blood pressure. I was having blood pressure for a week, maybe about 180, even close to 190. So this day was 190. I called up a close friend and I said, look, I think there's a problem, because it says online if you have blood pressure over 170, you can have a stroke. I have 190. Can you drive me to the hospital? And he and his girlfriend at the time stayed with me the whole time. I ended up actually having blood pressure going up to 225, or over 120. And I wasn't on blood pressure medication before that, so which also was, you know, talk about comments about doctors not doing as much as they should be doing, but I was really, really so incredibly grateful for him to do that, take the time out, spend time with me that whole night, drive me back from the hospital. So it's, yeah, your community and your family makes so much of a difference, and makes me really grateful, and yeah, for what I have.
This is very beautiful, and I think this is so helpful also for us people that don't have necessarily a chronic illness, but maybe know some people that have it, to know how we can help you guys, how we can support you in the best way possible without being overwhelming, because sometimes you want to do something, right? You want to help as much as you can, but sometimes you cannot do that much, but maybe a little gesture, a little word, coming to go somewhere or can help. And I think this is really helpful that from your side you say what helped you best and what you keep in mind, what touched you deeply about like those kind of support. I think this is so interesting, and thank you for that. And I have another question that might be a bit more difficult to answer, but I wanted to ask you, how do you envision your future? chronic illness, and maybe also the anxiety. You know, you have this disease, it will go on for probably most of your life, maybe all your life, and you have to go through all the different steps of life with it. I know, Eric, you're going to get married. Steph, I don't know if you're on this track at the moment, but maybe one day you're married. Congratulations already.
Quite a long time
Maybe.
ago. I got married
And
just before I started my PhD, actually, which is
that's
quite
cool.
young. But I think this is it. I think supportive people around you that you can talk to is like really key to your mental health and also your physical health, right? Because like Eric said, you need your friends sometimes to take you to hospital or to pick up your medicine for you, or
Definitely.
you know, and yeah, and so but I think sometimes it has to start with us, because we have to be prepared to talk, and if you don't tell someone, they don't know. So now I try and just slip it into the conversation. It's a bit like saying chemistry's great, come on everyone, you should all study chemistry, it's amazing. I'm just like, oh, I have inflammatory bowel disease, and I just say it, and it turns out that it's relatively unusual. And like I said, in the UK, people don't talk about their bowels very much. But it actually turns out that quite a lot of people know someone who knows someone. And after a while, some people are able to spot the others. Like, I don't quite know how, but it turns out there's two people I know, actually both through bell ringing, who both have IBD and have both had stoma bags. And even though I've never had a bag, I think they'd guessed already. I'm not quite sure how, but they had already guessed, you know. So actually, I just try and put it out there, I have this disease, because at least then people have heard of it. And I don't mind them asking me questions. You know, I'm not a world expert, but if I can just raise awareness of it, then maybe that helps someone else. And also, I'm prepared to talk about it, but there might be other people who are too shy, or it's just too difficult for them to talk about. So if I can talk about it, then that helps. Sorry, this doesn't really answer the original question about future.
It's interesting. It's very interesting.
So I think I'm pretty well controlled. I tried coming off the immunosuppressants a few years ago. It just flared up again. They don't have safety data for people being on this kind of level of immunosuppressants for this kind of disease, really. I don't think at all. It's just, but it's, you know, that's just me. So I feel like I'm in a good position. I can try and help other people. Eric probably has a completely different view, because he is in a different place.
It's already so brave and really amazing to be able to answer that and to think about other people also. Like, even more if you have to think about yourself first, you know, and then you already think about.
I think that's also true, though. I think you have to look after yourself.
Exactly.
And I've kind of done that bit, you know, and I'm all right, you know. But I think this applies to everyone. Like, you have to look after yourself, and you have to not beat yourself up too much. Like, we all have challenges to deal with, whatever those challenges are, like a horrid person in your lab, or, you know, whatever it may be. And I think we all have to cut ourselves a little bit of slack and say, you know, you're doing good. You're doing good. Well done. Eric, you've probably got other things to add.
Well, a quick comment on what you were saying. Though I think it is, while it is important that we understand, you know, a lot of self-help is in your hands. Earlier, we were also talking about community and how reaching out to people, making sure you have people you can talk to is also really important. I do have to admit that, you know, both of us are relatively outgoing, or can be when we need to be. And it is unfortunate that getting this help requires you to potentially, for some people, be a different person and to really be outgoing. If you're shy or less outgoing, it probably is a lot more isolating.
I think this is it. And I think the embarrassment, you know, part of the reason I can talk about it is because I'm okay, you know, I'm all right now. Okay, I take pills, but apart from that, I'm basically all right. Whereas, you know, if you'd asked me to talk about it when I'm in the middle of a flare up, and, you know, it's horrible, it's embarrassing, you know, you have to run to the loo. Sometimes you don't make it there in time. I'm just going to put that out there. And then, you know, you have to take extra medication, which maybe isn't oral, shall we say. And that's, you know, if you ask me to talk about that while I'm in the middle of that, might not be in a good place to talk about it. Yeah, but we all have like good days and bad days for different things, and I think just maybe having a chronic condition makes you a bit more hyper aware that people have good days and bad days.
I think having a chronic condition, and also answering a bit of Lauren's question about prospects, I think certainly having a chronic condition, at least in my case, does make me more aware about, I don't want to make this sound religious, but like how sacred life is, or how much value I should put into the things that I care about. As you said kind of earlier about trying to stand up and make a difference for the things that you can. I think for myself, I really started to care a lot more about, fuck it, I'm gonna die and I might die sooner, so might as well just do some stuff that means something. At least I get value that way, so might as well. And I think so with regards to the disease, I mean, yeah, certainly it's difficult for me to know what the prospects are. I think for a while we thought that this disease could be stabilized relatively easily, but then again, I started my PhD taking 2 pills a day. Now I'm taking over 30 pills a day. And it's likely going to be something not so dissimilar this for the rest of my life. I'll need a kidney transplant. Kidney transplant isn't a save all. You're going to be on medications for the rest of your life. The kidney transplant is kind of a stopgap measure. Normally the kidney you can reject the kidney, or oftentimes it's 10 to 15 years after that where the kidney will fall apart. So most people that get kidney transplant young, people that have my disease, for instance, and end up getting several, as long as their health is good enough to do so. So it's difficult to say. And I think especially in my situation, and a lot of chronic illness and cancer as well, you can be in remission per se, or you can have a kidney that's just really good. So it's for me, it's really kind of strange in that while maybe I don't want this to be depressing because I don't really think about it as depressing. I don't know how much time I have. I can live into my 80s, but also if you get a kidney transplant, it's still a risky procedure and many things can go wrong. So it could be less so. I try to put my time into things that pay off over the long run, but I have to admit, it is kind of difficult trying to put things that pay off in the long run if I don't know if I'll be there to try to see it off in the long run. But it's always always kind of a strange balance. But I think certainly I do value and try to find a lot of meaning about many more things that I do. And also recently try to realize how then, have meaning and value in the things that I do, but try not to get too stressed out about it. Because that also doesn't help with illness. It doesn't help much with mental health either. So if I want to, and also doesn't help getting things done also. So
makes it harder. But
yeah.
I think your point is so true for everyone, Eric, but a lot of people don't realize it, is that you don't know what's going to happen to you tomorrow, right? Yeah. And
but as a young man, or previously as a young man, I mean, or even as a younger adult.
Eric, do you mind me asking how old you are?
Well, 28.
Okay, so by the time my husband was 28, he was younger than that. So we got to work it. He was 26, just about 26. So it's happened just before his 27th birthday. We'd only be going out a few months, and he was involved in a really nasty car crash that wasn't his fault at all. He had both arms and both legs broken, 10 fractures. He only survived. He had one airbag. If there hadn't been an airbag, he wouldn't have survived. And he only survived because he was so fit. And most people, if you're not fit enough, the trauma, your body might survive the original, for a few hours, but then your body can't cope with the trauma because it's not healthy enough, basically. And you know, you don't know what tomorrow holds. Basically, the Scots have a phrase which is "you never know the minute," which is you don't know what's going to happen in the next minute, basically. And so I think what Eric's just said actually is so true for everybody, and maybe COVID has brought that home a bit. Actually, is you don't, you might think, oh yeah, I've got another 50 years to do what I want with my life. But you might have 5 days. You don't know. So, and again, not to be depressing or spiritualistic or whatever about it, but just seize the moment. Do what you can do while you can do it, because you never know when something might happen, and suddenly you might not have legs and arms that work, that you can go for a bike ride or whatever.
Seize the moment, but make sure that you still care about society and the people around you. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't be yeah, don't be selfish about it. But we're both in a cycle club, a local one, and there's a wide range of different people, different backgrounds, different ages in this club. And one of the older guys, he has quite an ill wife who he cares for, and he was umming and ahhing about whether to go, ironically, on a now cancelled because of COVID cycling holiday. And my husband said to him, like, Jim, you can do this right now, but you might not be able to do it next year. So while you can do the things that you enjoy, do them. And he was actually really grateful. And he's a bit of a funny, he's quite a lot older than us, so it was a bit of a role reversal. But it is good advice, while you have your health, mental and physical, while you have the opportunity to do things, take it. Because it's, and particularly in science, like particularly in academia, it's so easy to do that long day in the lab over and not work, not have a break at the weekends, not really have a holiday, because this is your PhD or this is your postdoc, you've got to get this paper published, you've got to have a chance for that fellowship, and you just spend all your time in the lab or whatever and not necessarily living your life. And it's kind of something I mull over a little bit from time to time. It's like, if in an ideal world, you would be able to be that high-flying academic scientist or engineer and have a life. But I'm not sure that in this current world, the two of those, yeah, you can have a life, but like, I have multiple different interests, and if I was in academia rather than in the management of a university, then I wouldn't be able to have time for all those interests. I might have to pick one. That's part of the reason why I'm not an academic. And I do kind of mull over to myself when I'm going for my daily walk or whatever, that can we get to that utopia where you can have both? Is that possible? I don't know, but I think
it is. I think it is, but it's us, a new generation, to push it to change the system. I'm not going to be part of that because I'm leaving academia after my PhD for sure. But but I hope that the new generation of people doing PhDs that want to stay in academia, that have this passion, they will push it, because the system is not possible. But this will be the topic of another roundtable, maybe, about academia and how we try to change a bit the system and how we don't have a fucking life next to it. Sorry for the fucking in the recording. Maybe it's not good.
Oh, it's all right. It's at least the third one, so I wouldn't worry.
But yeah, no, I think it's not depressing to remind ourselves that you never know what can happen. It took me like it's maybe depressing what I will say also, but it took me my granddad to die 2 years ago at the very first year of my PhD, during my first year, to realize that spending all my weekends in the lab, having no life, dedicating everything to please my boss and to just make everything be great, what the point? Like, I love my job, I like my project, but then there is people dying. I was thinking, if I die tomorrow, what do I want to remember? I don't want to remember that I just spent my time just working. I want to remember that I had like a nice life and I could do some stuff on the side. Of course, we have to work. Of course, when you have a nice job, you want to make it progress and everything. But there is a difference between having jobs that you like, where you want to put a lot of effort and invest your time, and then having a work-life balance that is like reasonable, and then being all the time just thinking about it. I think there is really a gap that we have to solved as PhDs sometimes, and even postdoc, and after when you're like a supervisor, and we all know how academia is working. I mean, most of us at least. And I feel like it's not depressing to remind us that yeah, it can be done at any time. Of course, if you have a chronic illness, you have to think about it maybe like faster than us that don't have a chronic illness, because we feel like we're young and we have all of our life. But the thing is, we don't know. I know a friend of mine, he passed away. He was 17 because a guy tried to steal his phone and he refused, and he got stabbed. 17. Fucking 17. Like, this is horrible. And how do you know that that will happen or not? You know, you don't know. It's always the other people, but we have no clue. So I think it's not depressing to remind ourselves that we have to do things. We have to work for stuff that we care about, and we have to be there for people that we care about, because you don't know what can happen. And I don't think it's being depressing. I think it's just remind ourselves that life is life. It's there is very good moments, there is amazing moment, but there is also very difficult moment, and we can lose people. We can also, people can lose us also. And yeah, as you said, Eric, and as you said, Steph, like, we have to make the best out of it, and don't wait too long to do things that we think about doing. And I think this is like a very good conclusion of this roundtable.
I think so. Someone once said to me, your job won't love you back. And it is true. Yeah. And by all means, do a job that you love, you know, put your heart and soul into it, but don't give it your whole life.
No, it's I think it's I mean, personally, I want to work in mental health. I'm already working on like finding like some companies that would like fit my interests for after my PhD, because I feel like, to me, this is so important to spread the word about it, you know, about how mental health is affecting us and how we have to take care about it. And we have to go to see people and to say, hey, you know, you have to take care of yourself and it's okay. There is no shame about it. There is nothing wrong about saying, I'm not okay. I cannot do that today. I'm not okay. You know, sometimes with friends, or it's a bit off topic, but with friends or anything, we kind of force ourselves to do some stuff, but we don't feel like doing it at the moment on the right day. And I think this is so wrong. You know, we should be able to say, okay, I have a really difficult day. I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to do it. And this whole thing in a society is not really working like this, right? We have to always be happy. Otherwise, your friend, your partner, your family will find you depressing, and they don't want to be around you, and they don't want to hang out around you. And I think this is so wrong. And this could apply for people with chronic illness, right? Like, you can feel like you're a burden or something. And this is not true at all. You're a person, you're not your disease, as you're not your mental disorder. And this is okay to say that you're not okay. There is no problem with that, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's both at the same time, because it happened. It's okay. And as you said, Steph, like, everyone has his own shit all the time, every one of us. And it's okay to just bring it sometime and to say it.
And I think we have to be better about telling people that we're not okay, as you just said, you know.
It doesn't mean you being the boring one. It doesn't mean that you being the depressive one. It doesn't mean that they should look at you as, okay, so we're never going to do anything again. I feel like if you really have a circle of people that know you, understand those type of very important topic, I think this is totally okay. And this should be normalized, definitely. And with MeWell, I feel like we're trying to do our best to work towards that, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really fantastic initiative. It's just great that these things are talked about now, because it makes, that's the first challenge, right? Is just admitting there's a problem and being able to talk about it. And it's a challenge to make the world better, but you've got to take that first step.
And you both are like great example of it. Like, you guys are struggling with like physical illness, which is already a huge thing. And then you have to keep on, you have to be resilient and to go through things as you have. You don't have the choice, you have to continue. And I think this is such a great example to have you tonight with us, because I think it teaches us a lot about life also.
It's been really nice talking to you, and I hope everyone found it interesting.
and thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you all for listening, because actually I find it really cathartic, to be able to talk about stuff and
it's easy for us.
Just being able to say things, in a open and supportive atmosphere is actually really, really nice for us as well. Well, for me anyway. I guess maybe Eric feels the same. That
no, I agree. I'm gonna stop the recording now. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really nice to meet you all. And if anyone wants to chat, wherever, feel free to reach out. And maybe we should have a chat about developing the MeWell. Well, not developing, because you've already clearly developed, but extending past borders.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, really, really nice. Thank you so much, everyone, for including me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being so vulnerable with us. It's really it's I think a very huge quality. Not everyone can do that.